The valley had always been a quiet place. Hills rose on every side, covered in green grass and tall trees. A river ran through the middle, carrying clear water down to the farms. The people of the valley lived simple lives. They grew crops, kept animals, and told old stories by the fire at night. But in every story, there was always the same warning dot. At the center of the valley stood a temple of stone. No one knew who had built it. The walls were high, and the roof touched the sky. Its doors were carved with strange signs that no one could read. Inside the temple, long rows of statues stood in silence. The villagers said they were gods of stone, waiting for the day they would rise. Parents told their children never to go near the temple, for it was not a place for ordinary people. Most obeyed, though there were always whispers. Some said the temple belonged to the old makers, a race that had ruled the stars. Others said it was a prison, and the statues were guardians keeping something inside. But no one dared enter. Generations passed, and the temple remained a mystery. On one clear morning, a stranger walked into the valley. His name was Aaron, though the people did not know it yet. He came by the northern road, carrying a pack on his back and a staff in his hand. His clothes were strange, not like the wool and leather worn by the villagers. They were woven from some fabric that shimmered in the sunlight, light yet strong. His boots left no sound on the dirt path, and his eyes searched the valley. With calm curiosity, the villagers noticed him at once. Few outsiders ever came to their home, and when they did, they came as traders or wanderers. But this man did not carry goods to sell, nor did he ask for food or water. He simply walked as if he already knew where he was going. Children hid behind fences, peeking at him with wide eyes. Old men whispered to each other, wondering if he was sent by kings or perhaps by the gods themselves. Aaron walked straight toward the temple. At first, the people thought he was only passing by. But when he reached the base of the great steps that led to the temple's doors, he stopped and looked up. The villagers grew uneasy. No one had climbed those steps in living memory. Some ran to fetch the elder of the village, an old woman named Mara. She came with a staff of her own, her face lined with years and wisdom. Stranger, she called out, raising her voice so it carried across the valley, do not go further. That place is forbidden. None who enter return. Aaron turned his head slightly, hearing her words, but he did not answer. Instead, he placed his hand on the stone railing of the steps. He traced the surface with his fingers, feeling the carvings that time had not erased. The villagers watched. In silence, he does not listen. Someone whispered, foolish man. Another muttered. But Mara did not call again. She watched him closely, her eyes sharp despite her age. There was something about the way he moved, something steady, as if he was not reckless but certain. She wondered if perhaps he knew something no one else did. Step by step, Aaron climbed the stairs. His boots touched the ancient stone, and each step seemed louder than the last. Birds flew from the trees, startled by the sound. The villagers held their breath. When he reached the top, he stood before the great doors of the temple. They were taller than 3 men and carved with lines that curved like rivers, and spirals that seemed to move when the sunlight touched them. No one in the valley could read the signs, but Aaron studied them with care. His lips moved as if he was whispering words to himself, repeating what he saw. Without hesitation, he placed his hands on the doors. The stone was cold, yet he did not pull away. With slow, steady force, he pushed. For centuries the doors had remained shut, but under his hands they began to move. Dust fell from the cracks, and the sound of stone against stone echoed across the valley. The villagers gasped. The doors opened. Inside, shadows waited. A long hall stretched before him, lined with tall statues carved from the same stone as the walls. Each statue was shaped like a figure in armor, with eyes of dark crystal that gleamed faintly even without light. They stood silent, unmoving, as they had for countless years. Aaron stepped inside. The villagers crowded at the foot of the stairs, too afraid to follow, but too curious to turn away. Their hearts pounded as they watched. Some prayed quietly, others whispered that the man was doomed. Only Mara remained silent, her eyes fixed on the hall where the stranger had disappeared. The air inside the temple was heavy, filled with the scent of stone and age. Aaron walked slowly, his footsteps echoing. The statues lined both sides of the hall, standing in perfect order, as if guarding a path to something deeper. He stopped before one, tilting his head as though listening. The villagers leaned forward, watching every move, and then it happened. The statue moved out at first. It was only the head, turning slightly so that its dark crystal eyes faced Aaron. A sound like stone grinding against stone filled the hall. Then another statue turned, and another. Soon, every statue in the hall had shifted, their heads following the stranger who stood among them. The villagers cried out in fear, some stumbling back. Never in their lives had they seen the statues move. To them, it was as if the gods of stone had awakened, but Aaron did not run. He did not even look surprised. He stood calmly, his hand resting on the staff at his side, and met the gaze of the nearest statue as if he had been waiting for this moment all his life. The hall grew quiet again. The statues did not attack, nor did they return to stillness. They simply watched him. Outside, the villagers trembled. Some begged Mara to call him back, to save him before the statues destroyed him. But Mara did not move. Her old voice was soft, almost a whisper. They are not watching him to strike. They are watching him because they see him. No one understood what she meant, but in that moment, a new story began in the Valley Dot, and it began with the stranger, who walked into their temple and made the statues turn to face him. The silence inside the temple was deep, almost like the air itself was holding its breath. Aaron stood in the middle of the grand hall, surrounded by rows of statues that had all turned their heads toward him. Their eyes of dark crystal glimmered, faintly, catching the dim light that entered through the open doors. The sound of stone moving had faded, but the feeling of watchfulness remained heavy in the air. The villagers at the temple steps could barely see what was happening. They only caught glimpses of the stranger through the shadowed doorway. But they knew something impossible had taken place. The statues, which had never moved in living memory, were no longer lifeless. They had turned as if they were alive, and all of them were staring at the same man. Fear spread among the crowd like a fire. He has angered them, one man whispered. They will crush him, said another. But Elder Mara lifted her hand to silence the frightened voices. Her eyes never left the temple. She did not see doom. She saw something else. Inside, Aaron remained calm. His eyes moved from statue to statue, studying their forms. Each one was carved in the shape of a warrior. Their armor was not like anything the villagers had ever seen. It was smooth, seamless, almost like it had grown around them. Some held swords, others held spears, and a few held shields marked with more of the strange symbols that covered the temple doors. Aaron took a slow step forward. The statues did not block his way. Instead, their heads followed his movement. It was as though they were not guarding against him, but observing him. Measuring him, the air shifted. Aaron could hear a low sound, deep and distant, almost like a hum rising from the walls themselves. He touched his staff lightly to the floor. The stone beneath him vibrated, as if the whole temple were waking. At the doorway, the villagers gasped. They heard the low hum too. Some clutched each other in fear, but none could look away. Aaron stopped in front of a statue larger than the rest. It stood at the far end of the hall, raised slightly higher on a stone platform. Its hands gripped a great sword that touched the floor, the blade wider than a man's chest. The face of the statue was hidden under a helmet with a smooth visor, but its crystal eyes burned brighter than the others. The hum grew louder, filling the hall like the echo of 100 voices, speaking at once. Though no clear words could be heard, Aaron tilted his head, as if listening closely. Then, without hesitation, he raised his hand and touched the base of the statue. The reaction was immediate. The floor shook, sending dust falling from the ceiling. The villagers outside cried out in alarm. The statues all shifted again, their arms trembling as if they were ready to move further. Their crystal eyes flared brighter, glowing with a cold light that filled the hall. The great statue before Aaron lifted its head fully, turning its gaze directly down at him. The hum became a voice. It was deep and heavy, like stone grinding against stone. yet layered with something more, a strange echo that carried across them. Air. The villagers at the entrance heard it, but could not understand a single word. The language was not theirs. It was older, sharper, filled with tones no human throat had ever spoken. And then something even stranger happened. Aaron answered. He spoke in the same strange language, his words flowing smoothly, as if he had always known them. His voice did not tremble. His tone was steady, respectful, but firm. The villagers froze, shocked by the sound of his speech. To them it was a stream of sharp, rolling sounds, foreign and powerful, yet the statues grew still again, listening to him as if his words carried weight. The great statue's glowing eyes dimmed slightly, like a fire settling into calm embers. The humming voice answered once more, softer this time, though it still shook the hall. Aaron replied again, and for a moment it seemed as though man and statue were holding a conversation across centuries of silence. Mara's grip tightened on her staff. She whispered to herself so only she could hear. He speaks to them. He speaks to the old ones. The villagers did not know what to think. Some were terrified, certain the stranger had awoken the gods of stone and would bring ruin upon them. Others were filled with awe, believing they were witnessing a chosen one who could command the temple. But none could deny that something beyond their understanding was unfolding before their eyes. Inside, Aaron lowered his hand from the statue's base. He gave a single nod, as though he had received an answer. The great statue lowered its head again, returning to stillness. The hum faded, leaving the hall silent once more. But the silence was different now. It was not the silence of a forgotten place. It was the silence of waiting. The statues still faced him, their eyes faintly glowing, but their presence was no longer threatening. They were no longer testing him. They were acknowledging him. Aaron exhaled softly, gripping his staff. He looked back toward the open doors where the villagers stood frozen at the steps. He could see their fear, their confusion, and their disbelief. But he did not call to them. He turned his gaze forward again and began to walk deeper into the hall. The statues shifted once more, not to block him, but to clear his path. Their heavy bodies moved with slow precision, stepping aside so that the center of the hall lay open before him. Each movement echoed like thunder, sending shivers through the villagers watching from outside. He walks where no one has walked, whispered a young boy at Mara's side. Yes, the elder replied. Her voice hushed, and the temple allows. Aaron reached the far end of the hall, where another set of doors stood. These were smaller than the main entrance, but far more intricate. Symbols covered every inch of their surface. Glowing faintly now that the statues had awakened, Aaron studied them, then lifted his hand once more. He pressed his palm against the stone, and the doors answered with a deep rumble. The statues bowed their heads. It was only a slight motion, but the meaning was clear. The villagers gasped in unison. Statues that had stood like silent gods for centuries were lowering themselves before the stranger. Mara's eyes widened. Her voice was soft, filled with both wonder and fear. They see him as one of their own. The doors before Aaron slowly opened, revealing a staircase that descended into glowing light below. Without looking back, he stepped forward and began to walk down. The statues held their silent bow. The villagers watched, unable to move, their hearts caught between fear and awe. They knew the temple was changing, and so was their world, and all of it had begun because a stranger had entered the hall, touched the stone, and spoken to the gods of stone in their own tongue. The staircase went down into the earth, each step glowing faintly as Aaron set his foot upon it. The villagers at the entrance of the temple could only watch the light fade as he descended. The doors closed slowly behind him, sealing him away. From their eyes, inside, the air grew warmer. The walls glowed with lines of blue and gold that pulsed like veins, as though the temple itself carried a heartbeat. Aaron walked carefully, his staff touching the steps with each movement. He was not afraid, though his senses were sharp. He knew the place was alive in ways the villagers could not yet understand. The stairs opened into a chamber unlike any he had seen before. The ceiling rose high, but there were no torches, no windows. Instead, the walls themselves shone with light, casting the chamber in a soft glow. At the center stood a great circle of stone, its surface covered with symbols that shifted and flowed like water. Surrounding it were more statues, smaller than the ones above, but carved with the same strange armor and crystal eyes. As soon as Aaron stepped inside, the chamber awoke. The circle lit with bright light, and the statues raised their heads. A low hum filled the air once again. This time, however, it was not only sound. The air itself seemed to shape the hum into words, though words not of any human tongue. The villagers above could not hear, but if they could, the voices would have been meaningless to them. Yet Aaron understood. "Who enters?" the voice asked. Heavy and layered. "And why do you bear the tongue of the makers?" Aaron gripped his staff tighter. His voice was steady when he replied, though it carried the strange tones that only the statues seemed to know. "I am Aaron. I come from the worlds beyond the stars. I have studied the signs left by your kind, the fragments scattered across the dark. I learned the speech of the makers so their story would not be forgotten." The chamber shook as the voices answered, overlapping like waves against stone. "The story is not yours to hold. The makers are gone. Their silence is their end. Why do you claim their tongue?" Aaron stepped closer to the glowing circle, his eyes fixed on the flowing symbols. "Because silence is not the end. Knowledge remains, memory remains, and if no one carries it forward, the mistakes of the past will return again." The statues stirred, their eyes glowing brighter. One raised its stone hand slightly, and the circle at the chamber's center changed. The symbols were formed, turning into images of stars, ships, and towers that reached across the sky. Aaron watched as the visions played out. The makers were shown as tall figures, their faces hidden by smooth helmets, their bodies clothed in shining armor. They built cities of light and ships that sailed between worlds. Their power was vast, but their eyes were always fixed outward, never inward. Then the visions darkened. Flames spread across worlds. Ships fell from the sky. The makers turned their power against one another, and their great cities crumbled into dust. Finally, the light of their empire faded, leaving only ruins and silence. "This is their end," the voices said. "This is the silence you would break." Aaron did not look away. "Yes, but I would not break it to bring back their pride or their weapons. I would break it to remember, to understand why they fell, so those who come after will not fall in." The same way, the chamber grew quiet. The statues stood still, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The circle's light dimmed, then brightened again, shifting once more. New symbols appeared, sharper and more complex, and Aaron's lips moved as he read them. His voice echoed with strange tones, words that no villager outside the temple could ever form. He spoke, and the statues listened. He translated the flowing script into sound, his voice carrying the ancient rhythm of the maker's tongue. As he read, he realized something: the language was not only speech, it was command. Each word was shaped to hold weight, not just in sound but in intent. It was a language built not for conversation alone, but for control, for binding machines in stone to the will of those who spoke it. Aaron's heart grew heavy. He understood now why the villagers feared the temple. They saw gods of stone, but the truth was different. The statues were not gods, they were creations. They were guardians, bound to obey the ones who carried the true voice of the makers. And they were listening to him. When he finished speaking, the chamber filled with silence again. Then the lead statue stepped forward, its stone feet echoing against the floor. Its voice was lower than the others, almost like a whisper of thunder. "You carry the tongue. You carry the will. Tell us, Aaron of the stars, what command do you give?" The weight of the question settled on him. He had seen the visions of the makers fall. He had felt the power hidden in their words. One command could bring the statues to serve him, to guard him, to destroy for him. But that was not why he had come. He lowered his staff. "I give no command. I seek no throne. I only ask for knowledge. Show me what the makers wish to hide. Show me the lessons they left behind." The statues did not move at once. Their crystal eyes dimmed and brightened again, as though they were considering. Then the circle of stone in the chamber began to sink, revealing another path below. filled with light far brighter than before. The voice of the lead statue filled the chamber again. The trial begins. If you walk this path, you will see the truth of the makers. You will see their rise, their fall, and the burden they carried. If you are worthy, you may carry that burden. If you are not, the temple will know. Aaron nodded once. He felt no fear, only resolve. This was why he had come, why he had crossed worlds and followed the old signs. Not for power, not for worship, but for truth. He stepped onto the circle as it sank, descending into the deeper chambers of the temple. The statues bowed their heads once more, and the voices faded into silence above. The villagers waited in fear and wonder. The temple no longer felt like a dead ruin. It felt alive. Awake, breathing after centuries of slumber, Elder Mara stood. Among them, her eyes on the glowing cracks of light that now shone through the temple walls. She whispered words that carried to no one but herself. He speaks the tongue of gods, but he walks as a man. If he returns, our world will not be the same. And deep below the earth, Aaron walked into the unknown, carrying with him the voice of the makers and the hope that humans could learn where others had fallen. The circle of stone carried Aaron down into the depths of the temple. The walls around him glowed with shifting light, lines of blue and gold that pulsed in rhythm like a beating heart. The air grew warmer, and the hum of energy grew louder, vibrating. Through the floor and into his bones, Aaron stood steady, his staff in hand, his eyes fixed on the chamber below that slowly revealed itself. When the circle reached the bottom, Aaron stepped into a wide hall unlike the others. The ceiling was carved into arcs that stretched high above, filled with symbols that moved and flowed like living rivers. The floor was smooth, divided into great squares of stone, each etched with signs that faintly glimmer at the far end of the hall. A great arch rose, carved with the same shifting script. Behind the arch was not darkness, but a veil of light that swirled like water. It was a doorway, yet not one made for ordinary passage. It pulsed as though it were alive, waiting for someone to step through. The statues that had stood watch above did not follow him here. Aaron was alone, but not in silence. A deep voice filled the chamber. The same voice that had spoken before, layered and heavy. You seek the truth of the makers. You speak their tongue. But words are not enough. To carry their memory, you must be tested. The trial begins now. Aaron's grip tightened on his staff. His eyes did not leave the arch of light. What trial? He asked, his voice calm. The voice answered, the trial of worth. Step through, and the temple will judge if you carry wisdom or only hunger. Fail, and you will join the silence. The veil of light rippled, calling him forward. Perrin stood still for a moment, his thoughts steady. He had not come seeking power, but he knew the risk. To turn back would be to leave the temple's secrets hidden forever. To step forward was to risk being lost to the silence of the makers. But he had crossed stars to reach this place. He would not turn away now. He stepped through the arch. The world shifted around him. One moment he stood in the glowing hall, and the next he stood in a place that was not real, yet felt alive. The ground beneath him was flat and endless, made of dark stone that reflected faint light. Above him stretched a sky of swirling clouds, lit by flashes of silver and blue. There were no walls, no ceiling, only space that seemed both vast and close. But voice spoke again. But it was no longer only sound. It was inside his mind, clear and heavy. First trial, the trial of strength. Before him, shapes rose from the ground. At first they were shadows, then they solidified into forms of stone warriors, their crystal eyes glowing like the statues in the temple above. Each one carried a weapon, swords, spears, shields carved from the same strange stone. They stood in a circle, surrounding him, their bodies towering over his own. Aaron raised his staff. He had expected this. He knew the makers would not open their secrets without testing those who sought them. But he also knew that the trial was not about breaking stone with stone. It was about showing something more. The first warrior stepped forward, swinging its heavy blade down at him. Aaron moved swiftly, rolling to the side. The ground shook where the sword struck, sending cracks through the stone. Another warrior thrust with its spear. Aaron twisted his staff, striking the spear aside before stepping back. The circle of warriors closed in, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Their size and power were overwhelming, but Aaron kept his mind clear. He remembered the visions of the Makers. Their fall had not come from lack of strength. It had come from pride and the misuse of power. If this was truly a trial, then it was not about defeating them in battle. It was about proving he understood what the Makers had forgotten. As the next warrior charged, Aaron planted his staff into the ground and spoke in the tongue of the Makers. His voice rang out, strong and clear, carrying command. The stone warrior froze in place, its glowing eyes dimming slightly. The others halted too, their movements slowing, their heads tilting as if listening. Aaron lowered his voice. I did not seek to destroy you. I did not seek to command you. I seek only to understand. The warriors stood still. The glow in their eyes flickered, then faded. One by one, they lowered their weapons and stepped back, returning to the shadows from which they had come. The circle dissolved, and the vast space grew quiet once more. The voice in his mind returned. You understand strength. To fight without wisdom is to repeat our fall. To control without restraint is to invite ruin. You have passed the first trial. The sky above shifted. The silver clouds rolled back, revealing a new horizon. Aaron felt the ground beneath him change, and the voice spoke again. Second trial. The trial of choice. The space around him reformed. Now he stood in what looked like a city of light, its towers stretching high into the sky, glowing with the brilliance of the Maker's creations. Crowds of tall figures moved along the streets, their helmets shining. Ships rose into the air, crossing the skies like birds of fire. It was a vision of the Makers at their height. Before the fall, in front of him appeared two paths. One glowed bright with golden light, leading to the heart of the city where towers touched the clouds. The other was darker, leading to a quiet place where a single stone tablet rested on a plain pedestal. The voice spoke again. Choose. One path leads to power, the other to knowledge. Only one can be taken. The other will be lost. Aaron stared at the two paths. The golden road was beautiful, filled with the promise of power beyond measure. He knew if he walked it, he might hold command over ships, cities, perhaps even the statues themselves. The darker path was simple, almost empty, yet the stone tablet drew his eyes. He thought of the villagers above, waiting in fear. He thought of the visions of war and ruin. He thought of the statues bowing not to power, but to his refusal of it. He stepped toward the darker path. When he reached the tablet, he laid his hand upon it. The glow spread beneath his touch, filling the chamber with soft light. The towers of the golden city faded, the ships vanished, and the bright path dissolved into mist. Only the tablet remained, and it opened, revealing lines of symbols that burned into his mind. The voice spoke again, softer now. You understand choice. To seek knowledge before power is the path of wisdom. The Makers forgot this. You remember. You have passed the second trial. The vision faded. The dark stone floor returned. The endless sky above swirling once more. Aaron stood tall, breathing steady. Two trials had passed, but he knew more awaited. The voice returned, its echo heavy. In his chest, the final trial lies ahead, the trial of truth. The ground shifted again, and the veil of light formed before him once more. It pulsed, waiting. Aaron tightened his grip on his staff. He had come this far, and he would not turn away. He stepped forward, ready to face the last and hardest test of all. Aaron stepped through the veil of light, and the world shifted again. The endless stone floor vanished beneath his feet, replaced by smooth ground that glowed softly like polished crystal. Above him stretched no sky, no roof, only an endless expanse of stars that seemed so near he could almost touch them. The chamber was silent, yet it carried a weight of presence, as if it held the breath of history itself. The voice that had guided him through the trial spoke once more, but now it was quieter, almost reverent. This is the final trial, the trial of truth. You will not fight here. You will not choose between paths. You will only see, and what you see will decide if you are worthy. At the center of the chamber rose a tall pillar of stone. Its surface was smooth, But when Aaron approached, lines of light crawled across it, forming shifting shapes. Slowly, the pillar transformed into a great screen of memory. The first image appeared, clear and sharp. Aaron saw the makers in their beginning. They were builders, creators, dreamers. Their cities grew from stone and light, spreading across mountains and plains. They reached for the stars with ships that broke the skies, carrying their people to new worlds. Their hunger for discovery was endless, and for a time, they lived in harmony with their creations. The statues around the chamber, once silent, began to glow faintly, their eyes burning with soft light. They stood as witnesses, not moving, but present as the memories unfolded. The images shifted. Aaron saw the makers begin to change. Their hunger for knowledge became hunger for control. They turned their skill not only to building but to ruling. Machines that once served as helpers were forged into weapons. Towers that once held learning became fortresses. Their ships were armed, their eyes sharpened, their voices filled with pride. The stars above the chamber grew darker as the images played. Worlds burned, armies clashed. The makers turned their strength against each other, their voices of wisdom drowned out by the roar of conquest. Aaron's chest grew heavy as he watched. The faces of the makers were hidden by their smooth helmets, but their actions told everything. Pride had blinded them. Their knowledge, once a gift, had become a chain pulling them into ruin. The voice of the temple spoke again, steady and deep. This is the truth of the makers. They built greatness, but they forgot humility. They believed their hands alone could hold the stars. They believed no fall could touch them. And so they fell. The pillars' images grew darker. Cities of light collapsed into rubble. Ships that had once sailed the skies broke apart in fire. The makers themselves faded, their numbers dwindling until only silence remained. And at the end, Aaron saw them building this temple. He saw their last moments, figures bending their heads, their hands carving symbols into stone, binding their guardians to silence. This temple was not built to guard treasure, the voice said. It was built to guard memory, to warn those who would come after, to remind them that even the greatest can fall if they forget the weight of their power. Aaron stepped closer to the pillar. His hand hovered above the glowing surface. He could feel the echo of the makers within it there. Regret, their sorrow, their final plea for someone to learn from their mistakes. The voice spoke again. Now you see their truth. The question remains, what will you do with it? Will you take their knowledge as a weapon, as they once did, or will you carry it as a burden to guide and protect those who walk after you? Aaron closed his eyes. He thought of the villagers above, simple people who had feared the temple all their lives. He thought of the statues that had bowed, not in worship but in recognition of his choice. He thought of the stars, vast and waiting, were others like. The makers might have risen and fallen. When he opened his eyes, his voice was firm. I will carry their memory, not their weapons. I will share their story, not their pride. Let their fall be a warning, not a path to walk again. The pillar blazed with light, brighter than before. The stars above the chamber flared, filling the space with radiance so strong it felt like standing in daylight. The statues lifted their heads, their crystal eyes burning as if alive. The voice answered, and this time it carried not only weight but a note of respect. You have spoken truth. You do not seek power. You seek to remember. This is the wisdom the makers lost. This is the wisdom you carry. The trial of truth is complete. The light swirled, gathering around Aaron. It filled his mind with clarity, with images, with words. He felt knowledge pouring into him, not commands, not weapons, but understanding. He saw the designs of the makers, their rise and fall written in stone. He felt the lessons of their history etching themselves into his memory, sharp and unshakable. And then the light faded. The stars above dimmed, and the chamber grew quiet once more. Aaron stood still, breathing steady, his staff at his side. He felt heavier, not with burden, but with purpose. The temple had tested him, and he had endured. He had not taken the path of power, but the path of memory. The voice spoke one last time, calm and final. You are worthy. The temple will sleep again, but its memory lives in you. Carry it with care, human, for your kind walks the same path as the makers once did. May you remember where they forgot. The pillar sank into the floor. The chamber's light dimmed until only the veil of light behind him remained. Waiting to carry him back, Aaron turned to it, his steps slow but steady. When he passed through, the vision of stars and memories vanished. He found himself once more in the glowing hall of the temple, standing before the doors that led upward. The statues bowed their heads again, their eyes fading into darkness as they returned to stillness. The hum that had filled the temple grew quiet, as if the place itself was going back to sleep. Aaron climbed the stairs, the glow of the lower chambers fading behind him. He knew the trials were over, but their weight would remain with him for all his days. Above, the villagers still waited, their eyes fixed on the temple doors. When they opened and the stranger stepped out, carrying no treasure, no weapon, only a calm gaze and steady stride, silence fell across the crowd. They did not yet know what he carried within him, but Elder Mara, watching closely, saw the truth in his eyes, and she whispered softly, "He has seen what none have seen." The temple has spoken to him. Aaron stood before them, not as a conqueror, but as a witness of the past, ready to share the truth of the makers. The air outside the temple was still when Aaron stepped out. The villagers who had gathered at the base of the stairs stared in silence. No one dared to speak. They had watched him enter a place no one had entered for centuries. They had seen the light glowing through cracks in the stone, had heard the strange rumble of voices. And now he returned with nothing in his hands but the same staff he had carried in. Yet something in his eyes told them he was not the same. Elder Mara pushed her way to the front of the crowd. Her old face was lined with years of wisdom, and her voice was steady when she spoke. "You walked where none could walk," she said. "You spoke to what none could speak. Tell us, stranger, what did the temple give you?" Aaron looked down at the villagers. Their faces were full of fear and wonder. He thought of the memories the temple had shown him, the fall of the makers, and the final plea they had left behind. He knew the knowledge inside him was powerful, more powerful than anything these people could imagine. But he also knew it was dangerous. "The temple did not give me gold," he said slowly. "It did not give me weapons. It gave me memory. The story of those who came before, and why they fell." The villagers whispered among themselves. Many looked disappointed. Some had hoped the stranger would return with treasure to bless their valley. Others had feared he would emerge with a weapon to bring ruin. But memory? That seemed too small. To weak Elder Mara, however, watched him with sharp eyes. "Memory can be heavier than iron," she said softly, "and more dangerous than any blade." Aaron nodded. He could see she understood. That night, the villagers built fires near the temple. They would not let the stranger leave without hearing more. They gathered around him, children leaning forward, adults listening with wary eyes. Mara sitting close with her staff across her knees. Aaron spoke. He told them what he had seen, the rise of the makers, their hunger for knowledge, their reach across the stars. He described their ships that flew like birds of fire, their cities that shone like suns, their guardians of stone that waited in silence. The villagers listened in awe, their eyes wide at the wonders of a people who had touched the stars. Then his voice grew quieter. He told them of the change that had come, when knowledge turned to pride, and pride to greed. He spoke of weapons forged from wisdom, of wars fought across worlds, of cities burning and ships falling. He described the silence that followed, when the makers were gone, and only ruins remained. The fire crackled. The villagers sat in silence, the weight of his words pressing on them. Even the children did not stir. Aaron lifted his eyes to the flames. The makers built this temple not as a throne, but as a warning. They wanted others to see their fall, to understand their mistakes. They left their memory here, waiting for one who could carry it forward. That was their gift and their burden. Mara leaned forward. "And now the burden is yours." Aaron looked at her. He felt the truth of her words. The temple had not tested him for treasure. It had tested him for intent. It had asked what he would do with the knowledge he had gained. And though he had spoken truth inside its walls, the choice was still before him. He could use the memory to guide, or he could twist it to command. The villagers waited. Though they did not fully understand, Aaron spoke again. "I do not seek to rule. I do not seek to bring the Maker's weapons back to life. I will carry their memories so the same. Mistakes are not repeated. If humans are to rise among the stars, they must rise with wisdom, not pride. Mara nodded, her face calm. But one of the younger men stood, his voice sharp with doubt. What use is memory? He asked. We cannot eat it. We cannot trade it. If you hold the power of the old ones, why not use it? Why not build the ships, the weapons, the towers? Why not make our valley strong and feared? Others murmured in agreement. The temptation was strong. The Makers had fallen, but their power had been real. To the villagers, who lived simple lives, the idea of ships and towers was like a dream. Aaron's gaze was steady, because to repeat their path is to repeat their end. Power without wisdom destroys. Strength without humility consumes. If you choose weapons, you choose ruin. That is the lesson the Makers left behind. The man sat down. But doubt still lingered in some hearts. Aaron saw it. He knew this choice was not his alone. The villagers, and perhaps all humans, would face it. Again and again. That was the weight of memory. It was not something he could hold only for himself. He lifted his staff. I will walk on from here. I will carry this knowledge to others. I will tell the story of the Makers. But the choice will not always be mine. It will be yours, and your children's, and all who hear. You must decide whether to walk the path of pride or the path of wisdom. Silence followed. The firelight flickered across the villagers' faces. Mara's voice broke the quiet. Then you are more than a traveler, she said. You are a witness. The temple chose you to see, and now you choose to tell. That is your burden. And your gift. Aaron bowed his head slightly. He felt the truth of her words settle within him. He had faced strength, choice, and truth, and now the greatest trial remained, the trial of what he would do with what he carried. The fire burned low. The villagers returned to their homes, some fearful, some thoughtful, some quietly inspired. Only Mara remained for a while, watching the flames die down beside the stranger. When at last she stood, she placed her hand on his shoulder. Walk carefully, Aaron of the stars. The Makers' fall began when they believed they could not fall. Remember that, and perhaps your kind will not share their silence. Aaron met her eyes. I will remember. That night, under the dark sky filled with stars, he sat alone by the dying fire. The choice weighed on him, heavier than any blade. He could feel the knowledge of the Makers resting inside him, waiting to be used. He knew that one day others would ask him to use it, to build, to command, to lead. The temple had trusted him, but the world beyond was wide and full of voices. He gazed at the stars, silent and endless. The choice was his for now, but it would not remain his alone. Morning came quietly over the valley. The temple stood in silence, its doors closed once again. Its statues returned to stillness. To the villagers, it was no longer only a place of fear. It had become a place of questions. Aaron rose with the sun. He had slept little, his mind heavy with memory. The temple's images still burned in his thoughts, the rise of the Makers, their glory, their pride, their fall. He had spoken of wisdom, but he knew wisdom was not enough unless it was lived. The villagers gathered as he prepared to leave. Some looked at him with respect, others with doubt, a few with fear. To them he was no longer only a stranger. He was someone who had walked where no one dared, someone who carried the voice of the past. Elder Mara stepped forward. She leaned on her staff, her gaze steady. The temple has given its memory to you, but memory alone does not change the world. Tell us, Aaron, what will you do with what you carry? Aaron paused. He looked at the people before him, the farmers, the children, the old, the young. He saw their hope and their fear. He thought of the wider world beyond the valley, where people lived and dreamed, where greed and kindness both walked side by side. I will walk, he said at last. I will go from place to place and tell the story of the Makers. I will tell how they reached the stars and how they fell. I will remind humans that knowledge without humility leads to ruin. This is the task the temple gave me, and I will carry it. Mara's eyes softened. Then you are a messenger, not of power, but of memory. That is a heavier path than most will see, but it is the right one. Aaron nodded, yet even as he spoke, He knew the path ahead would not be simple. People hungered for power. Many would not want to hear warnings. Some would ask for weapons, others for glory. The Makers had fallen because of such voices, and those voices still lived among humans. The villagers gave him food for his journey. Children ran to bring water. Women offered bread. And the young men who had once doubted him now carried supplies to his pack. Not all trusted him, but all knew he had seen something beyond their reach. Before he left, Mars spoke once more. The temple chose you. But remember, Aaron, the temple can only test one. The world will test you again and again. The answer you give will not only be yours, it will become the answer of all humans. Her words stayed with him as he walked out of the valley. Days passed. Aaron traveled across plains and through forests, carrying the memory with him. He came to villages and towns, each with people who lived their lives in work and struggle. In every place he shared the story of the Makers. Some listened with awe. They saw in his words a mirror of their own lives, their small struggles, their pride, their mistakes. They thanked him for the warning. Others laughed. They asked why they should fear the fall of people who had died long ago. They asked why they should listen to ruins instead of seeking glory for themselves. Aaron did not argue with anger. He only told the story again and again, planting the memory like seeds in the soil of their minds. One evening, he came to a great hall in a city. Here the rulers gathered, proud and strong. They welcomed him as a traveler, but soon demanded more. If you carry the knowledge of the old ones, one ruler said, then give it to us. Show us their weapons. Show us how to build their ships. With such power, we could command all lands. We could rise above every rival. The hall grew loud with agreement. Many saw in Aaron a path to greatness, but Aaron stood firm. The Makers rose higher than you dream. They built ships that crossed the stars, and cities brighter than any sun. But they fell because they thought as you do now. They believed power made them safe. They believed no fault could touch them, and so they were destroyed. If you seek to follow them, you will share their silence. The hall grew quiet. Some glared. Some muttered, but others lowered their eyes. His words struck deeper than they wished. Aaron left that hall without offering weapons, but the memory remained behind. Some would twist it, some would forget it, but others would remember. And memory was enough. Seasons passed. Aaron's journey spread across many lands. He became known as the man who spoke of the Makers. Children repeated his story. Elders argued about it. Leaders feared it or mocked it. Yet slowly, the memory of the temple began to live in human voices, not only in his. One night, as Aaron walked alone under the stars, he paused. He looked up at the endless sky. The same stars the Makers had reached still burned above, patient and silent. The temple's voice echoed in his mind. Your kind walks the same path as the Makers once did. May you remember where they forgot. Aaron whispered into the night, we will remember. We must. He knew humans would one day reach the stars. It was in their nature to dream, to build, to push beyond. But he also knew they carried the same danger, the same pride. The only shield was memory, and memory needed voices. Aaron would be one voice. Others would join him, and perhaps, when humans rose to the stars again, they would rise with wisdom instead of pride. The statues of the temple would remain in silence, their task complete. But the true answer would not be written in stone. It would be written in human choice. And so Aaron walked on, a messenger not of power but of truth. His steps were quiet, but his purpose was clear. The Makers had fallen. The temple had warned. The burden now lay with humans. The human answer was not carved in stone, nor sealed in light. It lived in every choice, in every heart, in every step. Taken toward the stars, Aaron carried it with him, steady as the staff in his hand. And as long as he walked, the memory would not be forgotten.